Hi everybody, this is Tom from Rocket Restorations, and don't forget, the dad tax is real, and Reese's Peanut Butter Cups is the best Halloween candy. I don't care what everybody says. Nom, nom, nom. And today we're going to be covering the Tony Townley collection auction done by Richmond Auctions. So for those of you who are not familiar with Richmond Auctions, they're mostly a sign company, and they've been getting some absolutely amazing results on signs lately. It's owned by Jordan Richmond and Mike McCandless. Jordan Richmond is a big sign guy. Mike is a son of Herb McCandless, so he's pretty well known in the car hobby. He's a really nice guy. I'm a big sign guy too, and I kind of usually bounce stuff off him, and they've done an amazing job with the company. They're doing firearms now. They bought up a couple other companies. They're based out of North Carolina, North Carolina, somewhere down there. And so they're doing a fantastic job with it. And this was basically their first foray into car auctions, and they hit it out of the park. They did a great job with it. From what I can see, the prices were super strong on this stuff. There was a bunch of Mopar stuff that was involved. There was a lot of race stuff, Ford, Chevy. There was even a Duesenberg. The prices they got were really, really strong on this stuff. So I just want to go over a few of the Mopars and a couple, wild cards today. Just want to thank Richmond Auctions for the pictures. The pictures we're going to use in this are from Richmond Auctions, and Steve Magnante. He did videos on a lot of these cars too, which I watched all those to get more information. Obviously, we know a lot of these cars. We keep a registry of VINs and stuff, so we kind of have some information. A couple of these are kind of interesting at what they sold for, and we're going to kind of go over all that. But Steve actually watches a lot of my videos and comments on them, so thanks, Steve, for watching. Appreciate it if you're watching this one. Yeah, he did a really good job with the videos and everything. So they did $25 million in sales, and it's kind of interesting because it's, for muscle cars, there's really two big ones. I mean, it's Mecum and Barrett Jackson right now for muscle cars. There's other auctions that sell muscle cars, but those are kind of the two main ones. So it's just going to be interesting to see if Richmond can take some of that away. Mecum has been very known for doing collections lately. They're very good at it, curating that stuff, and it goes to their major auctions. It's usually Kissimmee in Florida, or they're the big indie auction. Those are kind of the two where they generally go to, but they're very good at that too. And I actually talked to Mike after the auction, and he said that they've been talking to a bunch of people with big collections. So, and that's what they're gonna do. I don't think they're planning on doing auctions at destinations. They're going to be doing big sales of big collections. So it'll be interesting to see how they can grow from this. This was so successful. They did so well with it. It'll be interesting to see where they go from here. So here's just a couple. I'll start out with a couple of the signs they sold, which is just insane money for this stuff. They sold a pure gasoline sign for $320,000. If you guys aren't familiar with the sign market right now, it is just going absolutely insane. I don't know what the deal is. I mean, collectors like to have cool cars in the garage. They like to decorate them with cool signs. I've gotten really into signs the last couple of years too. Obviously, I'm not at that level in any way, shape, or form. But I've got some porcelains. I got some neon, some other stuff. Mostly Mopar stuff, obviously, because I'm a Mopar guy. But and then there was a Ford Flathead cutaway. They got $165,000, which I love cutaways. We're gonna do another cutaway here. That's not necessarily a Mopar, but I've always been fascinated by those. But some of the results they got on signs were just crazy at this auction. Keep in mind, most of these cars were no reserve. From what I could tell, there was 4 cars on the second day that had reserves that didn't sell. So sell-through rate was pretty good. I mean, only 4 cars in the entire auction didn't sell. That's pretty good. I know they spent 6 months setting up for this auction. They spent a ton of time getting ready and preparing for this auction. So, and I believe the first day was all no reserve too. There's a bunch of movie cars. They went for a bunch of money, but I said, I'm not going to go over that stuff. We're going to concentrate on most of the Mopar stuff here. So, all right, well, let's not delay. Let's get to a few of the cars here. And then at the end, we'll kind of have a wrap up on kind of what I think on values and, kind of what I thought about what some of the stuff did at the auction. I did talk to a couple people that went to the auction that were there in person, and one guy told me he didn't even raise his bidding pass because prices were so strong, which is, I mean, it's good for Richmond. It's good for, you know, Tony Townley. You know, that means the auction company's doing their job on this. So first car we're going to show here is a 1969 Dodge Daytona. We're basically going to kind of do these in rough order of the highest price, the lowest price, just because that's how they were organized in the auction, and it's easier for me to organize this with a video. Trying to organize all these pictures and everything into a video is a lot of work, trying to organize all this stuff. So but this Daytona looks like a really nice car. It's a 440 car. It's an automatic, so not even a 4-speed, factory Dana car, which you get a 410 Dana in these. That was still optional with the automatic. Of course, if you got a 444 speed, the Dana 60 was standard, but it was optional on this. 3,700 miles, owned by the Malcolms. They're well-known Mopar collectors that had a ton of really good cars over the years. It's, you know, everything from, I said, this was a fantastic survivor. It got $605,000, which, whew, Daytonas are still hot. They're still going. I mean, you know, it's a super nice survivor, but $605,000 for a 440 automatic is pretty crazy. I mean, it's probably the best color, you know, orange on a Daytona. You know, it seems like they're all red with black interior, 440 auto. We're doing one in the shop right now. It's a, you know, obviously a 440 auto car, but that was pretty crazy money for this. The one thing I did notice about the car, and I don't know, this is just a personal pet peeve of mine. Like, I was looking at the pictures, and it's been signed like 20-30 times by different people, and they had like different NASCAR people sign it like all over the car. I think that's really tacky, personally. If I see a car that's autographed, to me, I don't want that car. I don't know why people are obsessed about Carroll Shelby signing their car and Richard Petty and all that stuff, but I don't know. Some people like that, some people don't, but I personally think that's a pretty tacky thing to do. So, but yeah, really nice Daytona, Magnum 500 wheels, good color. The Dana is cool, but this one is, you know, shows that true survivors, original paint in fantastic condition, are still bringing really strong money in the market right now. You know, it's funny, like 15-20 years ago, if you would have told me, you know, B bodies were selling more than Hemi E bodies, especially 71 Hemi E bodies at auction, I would have laughed at you. But it's funny where the market is now, where, you know, Chargers and Daytonas, they're E-body money now, which is pretty crazy. So there was two 71 Hemi cudas at this auction, both hard tops. The first one here we're going to show is a yellow car. It was a 4-speed, sold new in British Columbia, Canada. You know, this is one of 107 made Hemi cudas. You know, this is kind of the king of muscle cars. You know, if you have a big muscle car collection or Mopar collection, if you want to be a serious collector, you got to have a 71 Hemi cuda. You know, that's just it's the top of the line. You know, convertibles, you know, those are millions and millions of dollars. You know, the hard tops tend to be in the kind of, you know, for good ones, you know, 400 to 600 range right now. I said for really good ones. You know, they always have the standard shaker. They have the fender gills. You know, this one had all the options, you know, body colored grille, which is not standard. Well, it was standard with some colors. But I think the body colored grille on a Cuda looks really nice. It has the fog lights. There's two problems with this car. So the first is there's no documentation for it. So it has a fender tag. It's been reproduced. This car just doesn't have a broadcast sheet. It's just not a very well documented car. I mean, it really pops on the screen. That yellow, the billboards, you know, colored grille, fog lights, all that stuff. It's a 4-speed. It really pops. But the problem is when you don't have a fender tag and you don't have a broadcast sheet, there's no way to prove what that car is. Apparently, from what I was told, apparently there's a picture of the car in 75 in British Columbia, Canada, with a guy standing next to it. And that's basically kind of what they restored the car to. You know, it had billboards, it had all that stuff. But again, to me, with a fender tag that's not real, you know, you can't verify any of the options, and that's a huge hit on this car. So the other dirt on this car is, so this car sold for $935,000 at Barrett-Jackson in 2022. I'm assuming Tony Townley was the one who bought it, because that was, you know, 3 years ago. I'm assuming he's still the same owner. But at this auction, it sold for $455,000. which to me sounds like pretty strong money for a not very documented 71 Hemi Cuda. I mean, again, it checks all the boxes other than documentation. Also keep in mind that all of these cars have Dave Wise reports, so I'm pretty sure they hired, the ones that didn't have it before, they hired Dave to go down and do reports on these. And Dave, you know, does a very good job on these, and it's good documentation to have. He goes over these things with a fine-tooth comb. You know, all the reports show, you know, what's correct, what isn't correct, all that stuff. It's important to have those for these cars. Dave's, you know, one of the, you know, numbers gurus for Mopar, and he does this for a living. So, but yeah, so it went from $935,000 to $455,000 at this auction. So the customer lost $500,000 on this car, which is, that's a pretty good hit on this car. But again, this car, it's all about the documentation. I mean, I think 455 is probably a reasonable price for it with what it is and what you have. I mean, you can't even, without documentation, you can't even tell if it's a 4-speed or automatic. I mean, again, you can tell that from the restoration. You can tell if the hump is original and all that stuff. But the car has been completely restored to a very high level. But without the docs, it's just hard to show anything on that, you know. Right, next up is the other 71 Hemi Cuda at the auction. This one, from what I can tell, is a better car than the yellow car. It's 21,500 miles. It's B5. You know, standard shaker. It looks like a good restoration. Has a broadcast sheet, fender tag. As far as I can tell, it has all that, but it's an auto. So obviously autos always go for less than 4 speeds. You know, 4 speeds are always rare. They made less of them. They're more desirable. People always want a 4-speed. This one's an automatic. And honestly, this one just doesn't pop like the yellow car. You know, I like B5 personally. I think it's a really nice color, but it's kind of a neutral color on a Mopar. You know, it doesn't like, it's not like, you know, pea green where it detracts value, but it doesn't really add value to a car too. You know, it doesn't have a painted grille, doesn't have fog lights, doesn't have the billboard. So obviously the billboard's like the yellow car had. It's that huge stripe that goes like, you know, all the way down the quarter panel on a 71 Cuda. Just a really, really cool stripe. And not having that really affects the value. And funny enough, on 71 Cudas, it's about a third. So about a third don't have anything. A third have the rubber strip on the side to protect the side, which is really ugly. I don't like those at all. And then about a third had the billboard. So, you know, this one's a much plainer car, and it went for $430,000, which again, sounds like a fairly reasonable price for it. I mean, again, it's, I know it's crazy saying like, oh, $430,000 is a reasonable price, but that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm trying to kind of tell you what the market is and kind of what it's sold for, and what I personally think about that. So, so this was definitely, the blue car is definitely a better car than the yellow car as far as documentation, all that stuff, but obviously automatic, and it just didn't pop as much. So, but yeah, $430,000 for the blue car. Next car here is another wing car, 1970 Plymouth Superbird. This one is a 444 speed car with a Dana 60. And it says semi-survivor, which I don't even know what that means. I was trying to get some more information on this car. I couldn't find a lot on it. I mean, it looks like, you know, the engine bay has been restored. You know, obviously the motor's not original. It's had some work done to it. But, you know, it looked like a pretty nice car. 444. So actually, I'm looking at the engine bay. It actually looks pretty original. There's like paint missing off the valve covers and grease and stuff. You know, voltage regulator's been replaced, you know, just like typical stuff. So I think this one was a pretty good survivor. You know, being a 446 barrel with a 4-speed, obviously that's, you know, a step below Hemi, but right there. This one got $340,000, which is really strong money for a non-Hemi Superbird. I mean, I don't know. Wing cars are just insane right now. Some of the prices people are getting for these things, but you know, Survivor, 446 barrel, 4-speed. You know, this car had a lot going for it. It was limelight green, which is one of my favorite colors on a Superbird. I think that looks really, really nice. 7,900 miles. Pretty good car. Strong money for a pretty good car. Next one up here is a 1954 Dodge Power Wagon. We always like to do a few wild cards. There's gonna be one Chevy with a twist in this too, but this one's not a muscle car. Obviously, it's a Dodge Power Wagon. Dodge Power Wagons have just been super hot lately. People really love these things. You know, the story on these is, you know, they're based off the World War II rigs that Dodge was making, but it was made for civilian use. But they're very utilitarian, very tough, indestructible. I've had a couple of them over the years. You know, it's definitely an example of maybe don't meet your heroes, because I had one and I drove it, and well, I don't have it anymore. So they're tough to drive. They're huge, non-synchro gears. You know, they don't have any power. They weigh a lot, but man, they're cool. So the deal with this one, so if anybody knows any more about this one, I'm really curious. I mean, again, I'm just going off the description here, but apparently this is kind of a factory crew cab, basically. And a lot of guys are doing these swaps right now. They're taking like, mega cab, modern Cummins Rams and doing crew cab swaps on these. They're making a crew cab out of them, making resto mods. But from what I can tell, I think this was done back in the day. It was a company called Armbruster and Company. They're the ones, like, if you ever seen those 8-door limos, they're the ones who made all those. They made, limousines, airporters, which I always thought were really cool. Those airporters, the 8-door airporters, I think they're really neat cars. Probably this had a article written back in the early 90s, verifies the history, which a little aside, like if there's a magazine article on a car, it absolutely does not document a car, because I've seen plenty of stuff in magazines that's not true. But from what I could tell, it looked like it was a legit crew cab from back in the day. It's not like somebody made in modern times. It still has the 230 cubic inch flathead 6-cylinder with the 4-speed. It had a frame up resto. This thing's really cool, but it sold for $300,000, which is a lot of money. Like perfectly restored power wagons seem to be about 100,000 right now, if they're done really well. This one's 3 times that. So kind of a little wild card here. Insane money for a really cool power wagon. Next car here is a 1970 Plymouth Roadrunner convertible. This is a V-Code 446 barrel 4-speed car. Extremely rare car. They did not make very many of these. And as someone with a V-Code 70 Roadrunner hardtop, not convertible, the price on this got me pretty excited, actually. This one sold for $220,000, which is insane money for this. So this car is like a project. Like, it is. Sounds like it was a California car, but like it needs a full restoration. It has like significant rust on the rear bumper, paint peeling off. Apparently this was originally EB3, which is kind of a light blue, and then it had a white and blue interior, which is kind of cool. You don't see that very often. Super, super unusual. Car was last licensed in California in 1985, and this is one of 20 built. I mean, they're really, really rare. And apparently the wheels are blue already, which I guess they maybe like, well, we're going to start the restoration soon, so we might as well just paint the wheels blue. I think that was ice blue on Plymouth. I should probably look that up, but I believe that was the color name, because they would always do that. Like there's EV3, the Dodge and Plymouth, it was the same color, Chrysler too, and they always had different names for them. This is a branding thing, but I mean, this one's a cool car. It's power brakes, power windows, air grabber. Cool color combo. You don't see the blue. Again, blue's kind of a neutral color. It's not a high impact paint color, but it's definitely unusual. You don't see that very often. I love the blue and white interior. That's pretty cool too. Pistol grip 4-speed. It says this number's matching. Obviously I can't verify any of this stuff, but I wasn't there to like look at these cars in person. But I mean, what a car! But oof, man, $220,000 for a car that needs a complete restoration. Man, that is crazy money for that car. Yeah, but I guess that's good for my Roadrunner. I've got a black 446 barrel automatic with burnt orange interior, hardtop. So obviously this is a Mopar-centric channel, but I just thought this was really cool, and I have this weird obsession with cutaway engines and cars and stuff. So here's an example of a Chevy cutaway. And this thing got $175,000, which is crazy. But you look at this car and at least you know where the money went. This thing had to cost a fortune to restore. So apparently this is one of 2 known cutaways from the 68 Motorama circuit. And apparently like this thing has 2 different front ends that can like change. So there's like the 6-cylinder front end has like the exposed headlights on the Camaro. Then the RS-SS had the hideaways. And apparently this like can do both. Like it has like this automatic thing where it like undoes it and puts it back together. Super cool. Like the detail nerd part of me like just obsesses about this stuff. I just think it's really, really cool. It was built off a really early car. The VIN was 24. So first day of production, probably prototype car that they built this off of. I just think this thing was really, really cool. And $175,000 is a lot of money, but this is one where it's like I can see where the money went, if you know what I'm saying. And here's our last day 2 car we're going to cover here. Then we'll go back to some of the day 1 cars. This is a 1970 Dodge Challenger TA Trans Am car. These are pretty neat cars. They're built for homologation for racing for the Trans Am series. Unfortunately, not that successful in the series, which is disappointing. They just were couple years of development behind Ford and Chevy, and AMC came in with a bunch of money and actually kind of, you know, they didn't do that well. The cars didn't finish. The small block, you know, blew up a lot during the series, but this one's pretty cool because it's a Mr. Norm's car. So for those of you who don't know Mr. Norm's, it was Grand Spalding Dodge in Chicago. They were very known for, you know, racing cars. You know, they sold high performance. They had their own dyno there. They would, like, you know, they had a bunch of models. Like, they were the one that got the big block Dart built. I'll go over that a little more in a minute with one of these other cars. You know, they made the six packs on the Demons, and funny enough, they used Chevy Corvette carburetors because they were cheaper than Mopar ones. But they were, you know, very famous dealer. The other thing that's kind of a cool part about the dealer is a gentleman actually saved most of the records from the dealership back in the day. And, you know, most of the cars have packets. So if you have a car that was sold new at Mr. Norm's, they have the window sticker, they have the IBM card, they have like all the information for these things, which is pretty cool. So any Mr. Norm's car gets a premium. You know, it's not quite Yanko premium, but they definitely get a premium. Obviously being sold in Chicago is not great for, you know, rust and condition wise, but if you have a Mr. Norm's car, it instantly adds value to it. This car looked like it was a pretty nice restoration. Obviously 346 pack, 4-speed, yellow, good color, and it got $130,000, which honestly seems about right for this car. You know, not too expensive, not too cheap. You know, like a nice driver, you know, Trans Am car seems to be, you know, around the $100,000 range for non-numbers. You know, I don't think it said if it's numbers or not. So if it doesn't say numbers, it means it isn't. And I don't think it said that on here, but yeah, it doesn't say numbers, so I'm assuming not on that. But again, 130 seems about right for that car. Well, let's do some of the day one cars now. Again, we're going a little reverse order because most of the expensive cars sold on day two, but this is one of my personal favorites in the auction. This is a 1970 Dodge Charger 446 pack. Again, 6-pack, not 6-barrel. Mopar guys obsessed about these details. So the 6-pack was Dodge, 6-barrel was Plymouth. Obviously, this is a Dodge factory 4-speed car. I love 70 Chargers. They're my favorite of the 3 years. I'm one of the only ones who think that. Most people like the 68s with the rocket taillights, the 69s because Dukes of Hazzard. I like the 70s. My first Mopar was a 70 Charger. One of these days I'll do a video on that car. It actually popped up a couple years ago and I really wanted to buy it, but it was like an insane amount of money. Chargers are hot. They've been hot for a while now. I don't think that's news to anybody who's in the Mopars. This one got $170,000, which is a lot of money for a non-Hemi Charger, but this one checks most of the boxes. You know, 446 pack, 4-speed, AV2 Hemi Orange. One thing I really like about this car too is it has the hood blackout. That was optional later in the year, V21. Really rare option on a 70 Charger, and I think it just looks fantastic. You know, the Charger has the insert, the big inserts on the hood. They put the blackout in there. I think it just looks really good. I like it on Roadrunners too. You know, like the 69 Roadrunners had that, the Organosolid hood blackout. I think it looks really good on a muscle car. It just kind of breaks up everything. This one has white metal top, white bumblebee stripe. Car looks really good. It apparently had 63,000 miles on it, and it went underneath a complete restoration at the time. Couple little things in the engine bay. It's got an ECU on the firewall. You know, I don't like the look of that. Strong money for a non-Hemi 70 Charger. And again, sometimes it's kind of hard to tell the difference. You know, when you get these collections, sometimes people go a little nuts. You know, like the Giuliano collection was a great example of that. You know, everything there went for way more than it was probably worth. You know, that might be, you know, I think some people might have gotten a little auction fever here bidding on some of this stuff because it was strong money for a lot of this stuff. But yeah, probably my favorite car of the auction and real strong money, $170,000 for a non-Hemi 70 Charger. Next one here is kind of the only clone we're going to show you here. I just thought this one was kind of interesting, kind of shows you where the market is on this stuff. So it's a 1970 Plymouth Barracuda convertible. Again, not a Cuda, Barracuda Grand Coupe. If you're not familiar, the three trim lines for a 1970 Plymouth Barracuda, whereas Barracuda was the base, Grand Coupe was the luxury, got more trim, leather seats, and then the Cuda was, of course, the sporty one. This one's a Hemi Cuda clone. It's interesting to say clone, not a recreation. That's a Barrett Jackson thing. Everything's a recreation. It's not a clone, it's a recreation. Clone kind of has negative connotations for some reason. This one got $130,000, which honestly is pretty strong money for this. We sold a really correct 71 Hemi Cuda convertible, again, clone, a couple years ago, and it barely even got that for a 71. That was a much better car. It was a big block car originally, 332 barrel. Originally had a rally dash, originally had A-track, still has those, still has original fender tag. You know, EFA green. I like EFA green. I think it's a pretty color. Has a lot of gold metallic in it. It looks good at night. You know, obviously green's not a plus. It's not high impact or anything. It just looked really dirty under the hood too. Like it had a bunch of rust staining around the radiator top. Like the radiator had overflown recently. You know, had a shaker on it. It's really hard to kind of judge how nice the engine bay is with a shaker on it. That's the same way with the Hemi Cudas up, you know, earlier in the video. You just can't get a very good look at the engine bay to see how correct stuff is. White interior on it, but that's just seemed like really strong money for a not that nice 70. I've seen 71s get this, but it seems pretty high for a 70 in my opinion. Just a couple more cars here. This one, I've always thought these were really cool. This is a 1971 Dodge Challenger convertible, but according to the notes, it's a factory pace car. So the Indianapolis 571 was paced by a 1971 Challenger convertible. And what's interesting is it's kind of notorious. So the actual pace car only had drum brakes on it. And apparently someone moved the braking cone when they were coming off the track. And the car actually went through the grandstands and hurt a bunch of people. There was a bunch of press in a grandstand where the car came off. And it actually like overcooked the brakes coming off, going too fast. And it actually went through the grandstands and hurt a bunch of people. So it's kind of... they're kind of notorious a little bit, but there's a few of these out there and they always bring strong money. In fact, the funny thing is we actually had, through the shop last year, we had a 71 orange Challenger, not a pace car, but obviously built at the same time by the scheduled production date. They knew it was coming out. And then after the accident, they kind of like hit all the cars because they apparently had like a stripe that was similar to the pace car and they got rid of it afterwards because they didn't want it to be known as the pace car. They got wrecked, but sorry, I digress a little bit. But this one's interesting because it's just a 318. It's a real base model, 2-speed wipers. They tried to make these pretty cheap so they were easier to sell, lower price. It's kind of funny seeing a 71 Challenger that's bright orange and it has a, blue engine bay in it. It just looks, or blue engine in the engine bay. It just looks kind of goofy. It doesn't quite look right to me. So it looked like it had a repo fender tag. I don't think that's the original fender tag on it from what I can see. It didn't look like a super nice car, and it still got $97,500. I was trying to find some other pace cars that sold recently. I couldn't find any other prices, but that seems like probably double what that car's worth. If it wasn't a pace car, that's probably a $30,000-$40,000 car. Obviously, the pace car adds some value to it. But they did make a couple 383 4-barrel ones. I think there was a big block one, but the vast majority were 318s. But again, that just seems like really strong money for a car that's not that nice, and it's a 318. But again, just my personal opinion here. All right, last car we're going to cover here. This one is maybe not my favorite in the auction, but I really like this car. I really like the concept of these cars. It's a 1969 Plymouth Barracuda, but this one's actually a cuda. So they made a package. So the Barracuda, obviously came out in 64, beat the Mustang by 2 weeks, blah, blah, blah. It really wasn't a success. The Mustang was selling millions of cars. The Barracuda hardly did anything. I don't need to get in that story. I'm sure most of you know. But in 67, they came out with the big block in them, which made them really interesting. Again, as I was talking about earlier, Mr. Norms is the one who did that. Chrysler didn't want to put a big block in the Dart in 67. They said it wouldn't fit. And then Mr. Norms, basically went through and put a big block in one of these things and to prove that it could be done and showed Chrysler like, hey, let's do this. And the Barracuda was obviously a beneficiary of that. Mr. Norms was a Dodge dealer, so they didn't sell any Barracudas, but the Barracuda got it as well. So by 69, they kind of refined it a little bit. Like the 67 cars had really, really restrictive cast iron manifolds, and they just didn't work that well. And by 69, they'd freed up, I think it was 25 horsepower, just by redesigning the exhaust manifolds, because it is really tight. I mean, there's not a lot of room on these A-bodies. There's a bunch of special stuff they did to the motors. There's unique motor mounts to them. Exhaust manifolds are unique, big torsion bars. They did a bunch of stuff to make these cars work, but this car just really spoke to me. It just was really authentic and really nice. And it's a project. It's not like a super nice restored car, but personally, that's kind of what I like. Perfectly restored cars, you have a hard time driving. I really like project cars. So they made 463 big block Barracudas in 69, only 153 of the 4-speed, so it's a pretty rare car. And again, this is the CUDA package. So until 69, everybody called them CUDAs. They're Barracudas, but there was actually a package, the A57 package, that was a CUDA package. It got you hood scoops, got you stripes, got you a few other things too. Really cool package. And of course, by 70, it was a regular model. It was the sporty model. So the engine's numbers matching in this one. Tranny's not. Again, it's not unusual on a 4-speed car. In fact, there's a reason why 4-speed cars, if they have a numbers matching engine, they're worth more money, because it's so rare to have a numbers matching motor in a 4-speed car. Just because they got abused. There's no rev limiters on these. People just rev them to the moon and blow up the motors. And back in the day, nobody cared about numbers matching motors. Nobody cared about that stuff. If they blew it up, they would just throw it away and then move on. They'd find a 383 in a wrecking yard out of a Newport or something, and then they'd be on their way. This one's got power steering. It's got the 4-speed, power disc brakes, hood scoops. A lot of that stuff wasn't even available early on the big block cars because they didn't think there was room for them, and they finally made them work later. Fender tag, it's there, it's rusty, it's crusty, but that's kind of what it is. Another interesting thing on this is just again, Tom being a pet peeve here and being a detail nerd, but it has the wrong dog dishes on it. Like, that's a pretty easy detail to get right. The dog dishes on a plane, it should say Plymouth Division on them. I don't know, that's just one thing. It's like, it's kind of like with the blackout behind the grill I always crow about, or black engine bays on a Mopar. Like, it's just like, it's one of those little details where it's like, okay, you missed that. That's the easy stuff. Like, what else did you miss? But I digress. Obviously, I haven't seen this car in person, so I can't vouch for its authenticity. I watched the Steve Maggs video on it. I got a good idea of kind of what it looked like, but it's just like, that just kind of bothers me. They can't get the dog dishes right. But this is one of my favorite cars of the auction. Really cool. The auction actually says it's one of 30 383 A57 4-speeds. I don't know. Steve said it was one of 153. I don't know. It's rare. Between one of the two. Well, just want to say congratulations to Richmond Auctions. You guys did a pretty good job on this stuff. The prices you guys got for this stuff was amazing. There's a lot of really strong prices on this stuff. I didn't really see anything go for under the money as far as I could tell. Obviously, I'm not going deep dive into the GM and Ford stuff here and the signs, but everything looked like it was... they got really strong money for this stuff. I mean, $25 million in sales is pretty crazy. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they start taking some of these big collections away from Mecum, and Richmond's going to try to do it, because you can kind of get, personalized service. People are coming just to bid on your stuff. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that starts happening, because they've been killing it with collections. I know they just got a big sign guy out my way, just passed away, and I know Richmond just got a big consignment for that. Again, signs, not cars, but it wouldn't surprise me if they do that at all. So, and I know I'm probably gonna get some comments on this. Most people won't make it this way. I always have to say this when I do these auctions. It's like, I understand that most people can't afford these cars. I can't afford most of these cars. They're way out of my price range, but I do these videos to kind of keep you guys updated what the market's doing right now, how things are going. Things are going up, things are going down. No matter what, it does affect you. Even if you have a Duster or a Valiant, a price of a big block Barracuda, a 69, makes a difference. If that Barracuda sold for $100 instead of $40,000, that makes the lesser cars go up. And then if a Barracuda goes up, just a plain Jane Slant 6 Barracuda goes up to $15,000-$20,000, well, that makes Valiants go up. That makes Darts go up. It's not a zero-sum game. Like, a rising tide lifts all boats. So, kind of what I think about the market right now, it's been a little rough lately. I deal with a lot of project cars. That's the stuff I like to buy. I like getting my hands dirty. I like reviving cars. I like bringing them back. I've been doing a lot of estates lately. As you've seen some of my videos, I just brought a Challenger and a 344 speed swinger home last week. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking at. And that market's definitely soft right now. It seems like the people who have a lot of money have a lot of money. They don't mind spending it right now. But the lower end of the market, people are a little nervous right now about the economy and some of the other stuff. So it's definitely been, some nervousness with that. And I've definitely seen on project cars that the prices aren't that strong right now. The cost of restoration keep on going up. It's very expensive to buy a project car to restore it, and that's kind of what I've seen right now. But this auction shows the top end of the market still strong, and good cars are bringing good money. The yellow 71 Hemi Cuda that dropped 50% in value, you know, that car doesn't have documentation. It's not a good car. The good cars are bringing strong money, you know, numbers matching, fender tags, broadcast sheets, you know, that's the stuff that's bringing real money right now. And that's the lesson, you know, buy the best car you can. You know, if you want a 71 Hemi Cuda and you're going to compromise on it and buy a car that doesn't have documentation and not numbers matching, then it's going to be worth way less on the back end. All right. Well, appreciate everybody for watching. This is Tom with Rocket Restorations, and we'll talk to you guys soon.